Welcome to our continuing series on questions and answers from the works of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Today's subject is Knowledge, Part 5, from Sri Aurobindo. There is indeed a soul personality, representative of this entity already built up within us, which puts forward a fine psychic element in our natural being. But this finer factor in our normal makeup is not yet dominant and has only a limited action. Our soul is not the overt guide and master of our thought and acts. It has to rely on the mental, vital, physical instruments for self-expression and is constantly overpowered by our mind and life force. But if once it can succeed in remaining in constant communion with its own larger occult reality, and this can only happen when we go deep into our subliminal paths. It is no longer dependent. It can become powerful and sovereign, armed with an intrinsic spiritual perception of the truth of things and a spontaneous discernment which separates the truth from the falsehood of the ignorance and inconscience, distinguishes the divine and the undivine in the manifestation, and so can be the luminous leader of our other parts of nature. It is indeed when this happens that there can be the turning point towards the integral transformation and an integral knowledge. These are the dynamic functionings and pragmatic values of the subliminal cognition. But what concerns us in our present inquiry is to learn from its way of action the exact character of this deeper and larger cognition and how it is related to true knowledge. Its main character is a knowledge by the direct contact of consciousness with its object, or of consciousness with other consciousness. But in the end, we discover that this power is an outcome of a secret knowledge by identity, a translation of it into a separative awareness of things. For, as in the direct contact proper to our normal consciousness and surface cognition, it is the meeting or friction of the living being with the existence outside it that awakens the spark of conscious knowledge. So here it is some contact that sets in action a pre-existent secret knowledge and brings it to the surface. For consciousness is one in the subject and the object, and in the contact of existence with existence, this identity brings to light or awakens in the self the dormant knowledge of this other self outside it. But while this pre-existent knowledge comes up in the surface mind as a knowledge acquired, it arises in the subliminal as a thing seen, caught from within, remembered as it were, or when it is fully intuitive, self-evident to the inner awareness, or it is taken in from the object contacted, but with an immediate response as to something intimately recognizable. In the surface consciousness, Knowledge represents itself as a truth seen from outside, thrown on us from the object, or as a response to its touch on the sense, a perceptive reproduction of its objective actuality. Our surface mind is obliged to give to itself this account of its knowledge, because the wall between itself and the outside world is pierced by the gates of sense, and it can catch through these gates the surface of outward objects, though not what is within them. But there is no such ready-made opening between itself and its own inner being. Since it is unable to see what is within its deeper self, or observe the process of the knowledge coming from within, it has no choice but to accept what it does see, the external object, as the cause of its knowledge. Thus, all our mental knowing of things represents itself to us as objective, a truth imposed on us from outside. Our knowledge is a reflection or responsive construction reproducing in us a figure or picture or a mental scheme of something that is not in our own being. In fact, it is a hidden deeper response to the contact, a response coming from within that throws up from there an inner knowledge of the object being itself part of our larger self, but owing to the double veil, the veil between our inner spirit and our ignorant surface self, and the veil between that surface self and the object contacted, it is only an imperfect figure or representation of the inner knowledge that is formed on the surface. This affiliation, this concealed method of our knowledge, obscure and non-evident to our present mentality, becomes clear and evident when the subliminal inner being breaks its boundaries of individuality, and carrying our surface mind with it, enters into the cosmic consciousness. But the cosmic consciousness of things is founded upon knowledge by identity, for the universal spirit knows itself as the self of all, knows all as itself and in itself, knows all nature as part of its nature. It is one with all that it contains, and knows it by that identity and by a containing nearness. For there is at the same time an identity and an exceeding, and while from the point of view of the identification there is a oneness and a complete knowledge, so from the point of view of the exceeding there is an inclusion and the penetration, an enveloping cognition of each thing and all things, a penetrating sense and a vision of each thing and all things.